welcome back to the garage with Bonesaw. Today we'll be looking at our first Chinese tank, the Tier 5 medium tank, the type T-34. Now, obviously this tank looks very familiar because it is essentially the Soviet T-34. It's almost exactly the same as the T-34 in the Russian tech tree, except for really two things. Actually, three things. First of all is that it's a different color and has a slightly different star on the side. The second one is that it only gets the 55mm top gun. It does not get access to the top 76mm long gun that the Soviet T-34 gets, and also the gun depression on this turret is slightly worse than the gun depression on the Soviet T-34. So first off, let's just take a look at the tech tree, because this tank sits at a bit of a crux in the Chinese tech tree. It's a very important tank, really, because you really need to play through it to get to the other tanks. I mean, you can go from the M5A1 Stuart. I want to buy one, damn it. You can go. No, you can't skip the Type T-34. I thought there was a skip to the 5916, but no, it turns out there isn't. You actually have to go through the Type T-34. And so really, like, it's one of those tanks you have to play if you want to advance further up the Chinese tech tree. And unfortunately, that's a bit of a problem for the Chinese tech tree, because overall, the tank's not very good. First of all, let me state that I've never been a tremendous fan of the T-34. I've never, like, it has a fearsome reputation in real life, and most certainly they were effective in real life, but in-game, I think they're ugly as sin, and possibly not as effective as they could be. They have their moments, but overall they're pretty blasé, Tier 5 medium, even on the Russian tech tree, and with the Chinese tank it's very much the same. It has its moments, and I've seen people do very well in them. I've done pretty well in my Type T-34, but overall then it's not that impressive a tank. It's pretty forgettable. And I think that's a little bit of a problem for the tech tree, because Tier 5s normally, when you start getting to the meat of a tree, you really find out what it's all about. And overall this tank doesn't really express the Chinese tech tree that well. And what's worse is that if you want to go up both branches of the tech tree, you need to grind it twice to get to the 5916 and the Type 58. The Type 58 is markedly better, though. It's much like the T-34-85. It's pretty much exactly the same, but it's so much better than this Type T-34. So, like, really, if you want to go up the Chinese tech tree, you're gonna have to sit through this thing. You're gonna need the dedication to go through it. So let's start off with looking at the tank. Well, 45mm of front and side hull armor, 40mm in the rear. Well sloped, though, so you can expect to bounce some low caliber gunshots. Anything that's about 75mm or higher will probably penetrate you pretty easy, though. Panzer IVs, things like that, will rough you up unless you're well angled. Angling this tank can be a good idea. If you put yourself at a roughly 45-degree angle, you're going to generate some really good angles on both the front and the side plate, which will make it much harder for the enemy to kill you. You do have some rather noticeable weak points, these fuel tanks on the side, as well as that engine hatch in the rear, but if you're letting people shoot at those, you're not playing a medium tank right. You also have this machine gun port and driver's hatch on the front, which are weak points. But generally speaking, if you're sitting still long enough for them to shoot at those accurately, you're not playing a medium right, or you've lost your tracks. Either one's not a good situation. The turret can also be pretty bouncy. This strange mantlet / gun mounting on the front has some good curves to it, so it can be quite bouncy, but don't count on it bouncing things. Generally speaking, the way you need to play this tank is be a bit sneaky. The tank's pretty fast with a top speed of 55 kilometers an hour. It turns pretty well with 42 degrees of traverse speed. It's not quite as nimble as, say, the Panzer III on 4, but it's still pretty good. 350 meters of view range is adequate. Radio range is a little bit on the low side, though, with 525, so be careful to stay in contact with your allies. The turret also turns quite well, so you can use this to circle immobilized enemies and to really outflank the enemy. But as I mentioned, you need to be a bit sneaky. And why is that? Well, it's because of the gun selection. You start off with either the 76mm F-34, stock gun on a T-34, pretty universal, or the other option is the 57mm. Now, if we look at these two guns, the 76mm only has 86mm of penetration with AP rounds, 15.79 rounds per minute, 110 average damage, 0.46 accuracy, and a 2.3 second aiming time. Fair to say, it's not a very good gun. It's alright because it is your stock gun. There can be worse, but realistically, not very good, and you'll want to grind through that as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, the upgraded alternative, the 57mm, is debatable as to whether or not it is a better weapon. It has a higher rate of fire with 26 rounds per minute, 112mm of average penetration, 85 average damage. Unfortunately, it's a bit low, and 0.34 accuracy, which is good, but the 2.3 aim time can be a little bit lengthy, especially for this gun, considering the amount of damage it does. You really need to wait for it to aim in. It can be quite consistent when it is fully aimed, but you really need to wait for it to aim in and sit still to use that. Unfortunately, with 350 meters of view range and the gun depression on this gun, it's very hard to get into an adequate position to really get those consistent sniper shots, which is what you want. You can really punish things like Panzer IVs, Shermans, things like that, if you can get those consistent follow-up shots into them. Unfortunately, that generally means you need to sit still, and sitting still in this thing isn't that great of an idea. But it is still a capable weapon in the right hands. The other weakness also is that 112mm of penetration. That should be enough to penetrate something like a KV. Unfortunately, for some reason, it doesn't always seem to turn out that way. This gun's average penetration, it seems quite high, but its actual penetration in game seems to be slightly lower. You can very easily bounce off KVs even if they angle themselves slightly, so that's a problem. Packing some gold rounds can be a good idea because they do give you 189mm of penetration, which is much better. And with the consistency of this gun when it's fully aimed, you can really ensure that you're not wasting those credits when you fire your gold rounds. Overall, this tank does tend to take critical damage quite easily, which is the same for a lot of kind of lower tier Soviet and Chinese vehicles, so be mindful of that. I generally don't pack a repair kit, but if you really must, I think it could be a good idea, especially for things like your tracks or your gun, because you really don't want to be losing those. And overall, this tank actually platoons quite well. Our favoured platoon vehicle at the moment is to drive this alongside a BDR G1B. Really allows you to give that flank protection to the heavier BDR, and the BDR can give you that heavier firepower that your 57mm lacks. And that's what I think is the best way to grind this tank, is find yourself a friend with a tier 5 heavy tank, KV, T1 heavy, something like that, and take them out and, generally speaking, have a good time. You'll see it in the review footage. Both myself and Fagline will be driving in a platoon, and he'll be rocking his BDR G1B, and we'll be scoring multiple Brothers in Arms badges. So, that's generally a good way to play with this tank. Unfortunately, for anyone driving this tank, much like the rest of the Chinese tree before Tier 5, not a lot of the gear carries over, so you won't have any of the engines or any of the radios or anything for this tank. And with the stock radio, you only have about 325 meters of signal range. You really need that upgraded radio for the battlefield awareness. The engine can kind of wait. The basic engine's 480 horsepower, it does okay. You don't need the tracks to mount the upgraded turret, the upgraded gun. So generally speaking, just go straight for the turret and the gun, and then once you've gotten those, work everything else out. It's really up to you whether or not you want to follow the Chinese light tree or the Chinese medium tree. The light tree doesn't really go anywhere, but Chinese light tanks are quite potent. They are very well armoured for a light tank considering their round turrets, and also have some quite heavy firepower. The higher tier Chinese mediums are much the same. Their lower tier mediums are very similar to the Russian ones until you get to the t-34-1. But this also lets you unlock the IS-2 and the other Chinese heavy tanks further down the line with their very powerful high caliber guns, which, unlike the Soviet heavy tanks, are capable of firing heat rounds. So ultimately there is some reward at the end of the Chinese tech tree. It's just that you have to go through some rather difficult stages early on. But overall, this tank is somewhat effective if you get used to it, and if you enjoyed this 57mm gun on things like the T-28, you can certainly have an enjoyable time, if not an effective time, driving this tank and making your way down the Chinese tech tree. So here we are on Malinovka in the Chinese Tier 5 medium tank, the Type T-34. Fegelein is in his French Tier 5 heavy tank, the BDRG-1B. So just setting up here to overwatch this Panzer III on 4, who's going across the field to get some early spots. So I'll aim in on the Panzer 1C there. Unfortunately missing out on the kill shot. Take a shot at the T-46 and miss, and follow up with a shot on the T-14. Now you will notice there is a bit of rubber banding going on. Like a lot of my other recent replays, it's just a thing that happens with the replay file. It's unavoidable. It's been happening mainly since patch 8.7 came out, and I can't really do anything about it. So I apologise for that, and hopefully you'll put up with it. But really, it's unavoidable, and hopefully it will be fixed in the next patch. Right, now we're just waiting here for some more spots on the enemy, because we don't want to cross that field just yet. And I don't particularly want to move up the hill flank, but simply because this tank doesn't have very good gun depression, so I'm not going to be very useful on the hill. So instead I'm going to finish off this S-35 tank destroyer, because he's a very potent threat on the enemy team. It did appear that he was only mounting the 17-pounder gun, but that's still a tremendous threat. So Fegelein's already got himself 2 kills with that very powerful DCA-30 gun. Alright, now unfortunately we don't have much support up there for that Panzer IV, M4 Sherman. So we'll be moving up to back him, but we want to be cautious with it, because there is still plenty of tanks left on the enemy team to defend, and plenty of tanks such as the Stug, the T-40 KVs, pretty much everything from the Bison upwards can do a significant amount of damage to us quite easily. So it pays to be cautious and to avoid getting into an unnecessary shooting contest that we may not win, particularly against those very potent tank destroyers. So at the moment, caution is the word, just lurking in these bushes, trying to circle around. And now we're going to break cover and just cross the field, because we know that the enemy are generally corralled up on this side of the flank. So we want to move into a position where we can attack their sides, but not really be in a funnel position where they can focus their fire on us. So currently we know that we've got a T-14, T-40 and Stug 3 remaining to defend the cap. However, there are still some medium tanks that are unaccounted for, and it will turn out that the Panzer IV is lurking around about G8. So we'll see some evidence of him in a minute. But moving up, trying to get some outflanks on these tank destroyers. Unfortunately, our light tank is lemming training in to an extent. He really shouldn't have tried to take these 3 tanks on in a 1v1 fight. So I get 2 shots into the T-40 and take 1 into return. I probably shouldn't have remained there as long as I did, but I got a little bit greedy and took a little bit of damage in return. So just trying to circle around, get some shots on this Stug. Unfortunately, I don't have the gun depression to quite get the shots at him. And the Bison is now shooting at me, as well as some other things on the other flank. So just trying to maneuver around, pull back a little bit, and throw off any shots the enemy might have at us. Because if we move back into these bushes, we can increase our camouflage and try to break contact. So at the moment it's slow and steady. We don't want to rush them too much, because it's still a 3v1 fight, provided that I go in on my own. So I'm just going to move up here, try and get some shots on that T-40, who I know is inside the house. So getting a brief silhouette on him there. Unfortunately, I did not have a shot. And unfortunately, our mediums on this flank as well are currently getting chewed up by the Stug and the T-14. So our other flank isn't doing too well, so I've ordered Fegelein not to come over here and assist. He's on orders to stay over on the other flank just in case the enemy push down, because a BDRG-1B, while not particularly heavily armoured, is a very, very powerful piece of firepower. So taking out the T-40, that's one tank down. Our Panzer 1C is complaining, as usual. generally speaking, you either see really, really good Panzer 1C drivers or really, really bad ones, and our Panzer 1C was pretty average. This A20 is foolishly rushing the Stug. He really shouldn't have gone 1-to-1 there with the Stug. And he did block off a couple of my shots that I could have used to save him. So I get one into the Stug there, miss the one on his track unit there, and will luckily get one into his rear deck now, but unfortunately not before the A20 is destroyed. Alright, I've spotted the Panzer IV on my left flank, and I am not moving to back up the Panzer 1C, simply because if I do so, I'll leave myself vulnerable to fire from the Panzer IV. So I blocked the shot from the Panzer IV there, a little bit of face timing. That can happen in this tank, but don't count on it. Bouncing shots is not a regular occurrence. Your armor is only 45mm sloped, and while that does increase it a decent amount, the end result is still penetrable by most tier 5 guns. And I do know that this Panzer IV is mounting the at least the L43. I believe it actually may be the L48, 75mm gun. So I missed my first shot, he misses his as well. Follow up with a second shot. So as you can see, I do have a good rate of fire advantage here. However, my damage per shot is much lower. So he's just jammed my turret. I'll damage his tracks and then set him on fire to finish him off. Unfortunately, I'm not in enough health to really contest this T14. I can't really get away, so this will be the death of me. But thus far, I've gotten 4 kills and practically reduced the enemy team to 1 defender on the cap. Alright, so we'll just switch to Fagel camera now to follow Fageline. So he's still back defending at base, but we've secured that flank. Just taking a shot at where the T14 was, but now he's going to cross the field and advance. And thus far he's gotten himself 3 kills with that very powerful DCA-30 gun, so he'll be more than a match for the T14. While the T14 is quite heavily armoured for a tier 5 heavy tank, it's no match for the penetration power of the DCA-30. So first shot will go into the T14's tracks. Fageline will take a hit from the T14 and finish off the T14 with a single shot. So here we are on Runeberg in the Chinese tier 5 medium tank, the type t-34. It's an encounter battle, and Fageline is once again in his French tier 5 heavy tank, the BDR G1B. Now, unfortunately, like with some of my other replays recently, this one also has a little bit of rubber banding going on. Unfortunately, once again, that's to do with the replay files. It's nothing I can really fix. Hopefully in the next patch, Wargaming will have fixed it, but at the moment it's beyond my control, so please try to bear with it. Alright, so we've already spotted at least one light tank on the cap. It's coming down here. It's probably Panzer 1C, and I'm indeed correct, it's a Panzer 1C. So I'll put one shot into him, doing a little bit of damage there, follow up with the second one. That's taken his track off, and the Crusader will finish him off. So that's good. We've taken out one of the enemy scouts early game, and that means the enemy really won't be able to get as much good early vision on us. So just moving up here to cover the cap. Generally in games like this you want to stick to these kind of back roads. You don't want to stay on those main roads, because that's where you're more likely to encounter some of the more threatening heavy tanks. So we've already encountered a KV-1 on the cap, and I'll put some shots into him, and as you can see I can't really do much damage to him. Despite my gun having 112mm of penetration, I can't really get through his armor, so at the moment I'm just going to be content to shoot his tracks off, and that way my team can finish him off. So at the moment it's really just distracting him and keeping his tracks off, and Fageline indeed takes out the KV. So instead I'll go for this T-46, easily destroying him and preventing him from breaking our line. So I'm going to move on to the cap, just try and get some cap points up, draw out the enemy, and engage this M8 tank destroyer. So as you can see, the 57mm, despite its long aim time, does have quite good accuracy at range, and some very consistent damage output, should the need be. As you can see, a T-49 getting tail-ended by looks there, so Fageline will finish that unfortunate T-49, and I'll take out a second M8. Alright, so the enemy heavy tanks have just shown up down the courtyard there. So I'm going to engage this Churchill 1 because I know I can at least penetrate his turret armor. So unfortunately my first shot misses, and wait for it to aim in. An unfortunate Stook 3 there takes a hit for me, but you know, I'm thankful for that. It means less damage to me. And so following up some shots as that KV, and Fegelein will finish him off. Now at this point in time we've kind of pretty heavily dominated this game. Pretty certainly we've got this in the bag. So I'm going to engage that AMX-40, but I thought best of it simply because my gun won't really be able to penetrate him. I'll damage that looks to allow the M7 to finish him off, and decide that it's worthwhile redeploying to engage that medium tank, because we don't really want him sitting down the end of the road plinking shots off us and lowering our cap points. It'll just make the game draw out longer, and we've pretty certainly got this one in the bag, so why not bag an extra kill? Now that medium tank is a Matilda, and he can be something of a threat, because if he has the top gun, the 2-pounder Mark 10B, with the Little John adapter, he can most certainly do some substantial damage. So racing this Crusader to try and get the final kill, and getting the on-the-move shot to the side plate there to finish off the Matilda Mark 4. So there's one enemy tank left, that's a Hetzer, and we know he's going down that central spoke towards Fegelein, so I'm going to move around and try and herd him around, and Fegelein will be more than capable of killing that Hetzer in at least one shot. And so myself and the M7 are going around, but Fegelein didn't need the assistance. He takes out the Hetzer quite easily for an easy win, and 4 kill brothers in arms right there.